In February of 2022, an urban explorer made his way to a long-abandoned laboratory in rural China. The location seemed similar to the many others he had visited throughout his time on TikTok. However, inside he would be greeted with what may very well be the most disturbing mystery in the history of TikTok.
This is in the air on Eastern on TN.
She feels like a real baby. That's because she has tiny bones inside.
February 2022, an urban explorer makes his way down a long-forgotten dirt road somewhere in rural China. His ultimate destination was a dilapidated structure shrouded in mystery for both him and all others in the region, with many referring to it simply as a laboratory. But what kind of laboratory was completely unknown.
It was like a Resident Evil laboratory.
This did little to deter the man. In fact, the mystique of this building made the location even more tantalizing, as it would make for the perfect setting for a video on his TikTok page. Perhaps the one that would finally thrust him into the public.
Yo, this right here, man. What's more cringe, dude? This picture or like when I roleplay as a paladin?
Public eye. And as he walked down that old dirt road, he believed that each step was taking him closer and closer to uncovering that building's original purpose. But what he'd find in that old laboratory wouldn't be answers. In fact, he would be left with far more questions, as the video he would go on to post would leave hundreds of thousands of people horrified, disturbed, and in many cases, scarred for life. With the clip setting off what may very well be the darkest mystery to ever unfold on the site.
Dude, he's really hyping this up.
Perhaps one of the most disturbing in the entire history of the internet. Of all the cases I've covered in the world of internet oddities and mysteries, this one is probably the most unique, as the contents of this mystery involve videos that can barely be broadcast in any capacity, due to just how disturbing.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, dude. So far, this video sucks ass. Dude, it is almost 3 minutes in, and all he has done is been like, this is the most insane mystery. Like, I don't even care anymore at this point.
They are. And although I'm sure some of you will be disappointed that the videos themselves are not shown in their entirety, I can assure you that these clips are ones that you don't want to see. And on that note, let's go back to that old dirt road.
Holy shit,
the
thank
location
God.
was one of many examined by this explorer who goes under the name Beanbag Adventures on Douyin, the original Chinese version of TikTok. And for the sake of this video, his real name will not be disclosed as he's never made it publicly available, so I'll just be referring to him as X. X's channel features a multitude of creepy locations.
Good name. Good name.
Left to the mercy of time and isolation, but of all the places he would go on to visit, he could tell immediately that this one was going to be different. As he entered the structure, he was greeted with an overwhelming stench that covered the building in its entirety. The mask he wore helped block out some of the smell, but not nearly enough to make it a pleasant experience. Noticing this, X immediately began to suspect that something was off, as he roamed the halls of the lab using the smell as a marker, following it to uncover its source. This led him past the first floor and down into the structure's basement, which consisted of old concrete rooms and tunnels, almost like some sort of fallout shelter. And as he passed by one room in particular, he knew he had found the source of the stench, as the smell coming from its opening was nearly unbearable. But having come all this way, he decided to push on and enter the room, turning on his camera just a few minutes later to reveal what exactly he had discovered.
来吧，兄弟们想看的，地下实验室，心理承受能力强的患有，随着镜头来。接下来大家所看到的一切物品。
As he enters the room, X shows a large pool-like structure lined with old pieces of wood, and as it comes into frame, he prefaces the discovery by saying that the contents within this pool are merely props from an old movie. He then proceeds to point the camera down inside, revealing thick green water, and floating within this water were what looked to be children, mere babies, and dozens of them decaying in the water. X then begins to gag and runs out of the room, shutting off the camera right before getting sick. The video is shocking, and as it made its way through the Douyin site, it was met with mixed reactions. Many took X's word to heart, believing his explanation that the children were simply abandoned props left over from some movie that must have been shot there, while others called it an outright hoax, believing that X's demeanor and the editing of the video came across as disingenuous, before going on to assume that the explorer had just set it up himself. But within this crowd were a select few who were more concerned. The bodies looked so real, and each one appeared to be in different stages of decomposition. And that smell, if they were simply made of plastic and rubber, then why was that smell so unbearable to the point that X had gotten physically sick from it? Following this line of thinking, if somehow this were to be real, then that begs the question, what were all these bodies doing in an abandoned laboratory? Given what seemed to be their level of decomposition, it was clear that they hadn't been there for more than a few months, yet this structure has been left abandoned for decades. And you can tell as much just by looking at the infrastructure.
Yeah, they can't show that shit
Due to
on
this
YouTube.
video having been posted in 2022, this automatically rules out the idea that this was part of China's
I don't think I
one-child
could look at that shit on
policy,
stream
as that
though,
was
right?
abolished back in 2015. Plus, that policy wouldn't have matched anyway, as some of the children seen in that water were, well, just that, children. None of them were infants, and some were even comparable in size to those as old as 5 or 6, which seems to immediately rule out this explanation. Digging into the video a bit deeper, a few others began to notice what they believed to be an off-putting detail, as directly after X states that the bodies in the pool were simply props, he then goes on to say that this video was going to be censored, and that you'll only ever see this from him. This prompted the theory that the movie prop line was just some sort of cover-up to allow the footage to be shown across Douyin, so that he could expose the true horrors transpiring in this old lab. Admittedly, some of these details are a bit bizarre, but despite all of this, the theory that these bodies were somehow real was merely speculation, and far-fetched speculation to say the least, as most would go on to assume the footage to be fake, carrying on with their lives and forgetting all about this bizarre video. And it wasn't just the viewers who seemed to immediately forget about this footage, as X himself
hey,
would
Cotsar, but
continue
thank you for the
posting as
resub.
usual immediately after this, making no mention of his discovery in that laboratory. And much like that laboratory, in the months that followed, X's video would soon be
Yo,
lost
X, thank
to
you for the
time.
resub as well.
Or at least this was the case.
Thanks a lot, Extra.
Until December 26th, 2022, when X would once again follow that old dirt road and return to the strange room.
兄弟们，防空洞里面那个实验室，一池子小孩儿，一池子小孩儿。今天我又来看一看，拍上了点视频。胆小的勿看啊，记得来注意细节。
This time, things within that tunnel were different. Upon entering, he would see strange bottles and tubes on the ground, which hadn't been there before, and as he approached the pool, he could now see children's clothing scattered all across the pathway, including a cap which would commonly be worn by a child. The pool itself was also slightly altered, as there was now a large blue tarp covering the majority of its surface, concealing its contents. However, at the far end was an opening, just large enough to reveal that those prop bodies from before were in fact still in there. Only this time, the idea of them being movie props was far less believable. It had been 10 long months since X had first peered into that pool, and now the bodies he once claimed to be from a movie set were far more decayed, to the point that not just the bodies were shown, but the bones within them as well. Skulls, ribs, hips were all on display, being revealed by the peeling of their rotten flesh, in a scene that looked all too realistic. So much so that X was now referring to them solely as dead bodies, as that level of detail would have been nearly impossible to fake. X then pulls out his phone and reveals the date and time, December 26th, 2022, 11:26 a.m., before turning to the exit and leaving in a hurry.
看下时间啊，2022年12月26，兄弟们，这个味儿啊，我居然能挺住。
Hey, so thank you for the resub. Dida, thank you as well. Thank you guys very much.
不知道说点什么。哎呀，这里还有这些药瓶子，拜拜了，哥走了。我去，这个臭啊！哎，拜拜，拜拜，拜拜。
The second video was far different from the first, as its validity is much harder to argue against. I obviously won't be showing it here, but the bodies were just too realistic. I honestly don't think they could have been faked, as even across all the big budget movies I've ever seen, no dead body props have ever come close to this level of realism, which makes it seem all the more unlikely that someone could have faked this just for a TikTok. And that sentiment was shared across the site almost universally. Rather than being a source of speculation like that first video, people were now left simply horrified, having likely witnessed the sight of a dozen dead children. And this wasn't the only major difference between the two clips either, with the most relevant coming from the contents of the video themselves. For starters, those bottles, clothing, and that tarp were all not there upon his first visit, meaning that whatever this pool was being used for, it was still being actively visited and worked on after that first video was made. And worst of all, the number of bodies shown in that water was significantly higher the second time around, meaning that whatever he had walked in on was still clearly actively happening.
Yo,
Despite
is this
disturbing
real?
detail, this didn't stop X from returning just a few days later, determined to reveal all of the horrors of that old lab. And upon this third visit, he would follow that tunnel even deeper, this time finding tubes with fetuses in them, skulls, and even a fully complete vertebrae, piled on top hundreds of other bones. He'd even uncover multiple large bags filled to the brim with even more skeletal remains. And what made this all the more confusing was that all these bones were from what seemed to be fully grown humans, meaning that within this abandoned building were bodies ranging from newborns to children all the way to adults. According to a few people across Reddit, X would make one more video in this laboratory, this time focusing his search on the upper levels of the building, revealing more bones seemingly belonging to children, as well as kids' toys and masks.
还是实验室的化学用剂，这里还有不明的液体，这里还发现了小孩子的面具，小时候的回忆，一张面具，开心。这里还一个皮箱，里面一只高跟鞋。这个应该是医院拍的片子。在走廊东侧发现了一个特别的格局，这个房间格局像不像是特别危险？医院的1楼、2楼、3楼空空如也。
I personally couldn't fully verify if this location was the same or not, but it does appear similar enough to at least mention here. With that being said, we were left with 3 to 4 short videos, and so many questions, the most overarching of all being what the hell was happening in this laboratory. This question prompted numerous theories, one of the earliest being
Wait,
that
you
a
guys
serial
mentioned
killer
links?
had been using this location to dump the many bodies of his victims. This would kind of make sense, as up until X had visited the building, it was virtually untouched for decades, making it the perfect place to commit heinous crimes far away from the public eye. But the main problem with this theory is the scale of it all. There were just too many bodies for it all to have been done by one person. Even a group of mass murderers would have a hard time amassing so many victims. And given the fact that most of these bodies seemed to belong to children, and the fact that they were disposed of in such a bizarre way, made many others begin to shift their beliefs towards other theories, with by far the most popular being that this location was being used as some sort of black market organ trade. This idea became a main focal point following
this is
the second
crazy
video
if
in
this is
particular,
real, dude. This
as
is
many
crazy.
of the bodies shown had openings in their chest cavities, which revealed that they all seemed to lack any internal organs, prompting the belief that the kids were killed for their organs, perhaps in a medical facility somewhere else, and their bodies were dumped in this location afterwards, assuming that they would never
You think
be
it's
found.
fake?
And in the minds of many, this wasn't just being done by some random group, and instead they believed it was being carried out by their country's own government.
China has no effective organ donation program. That's because culturally, Chinese people believe the body must stay intact even after death.
The organ trade in China is quite the rabbit hole.
Wait, really? They
But
don't
to
have
make
like
things
an organ
simple,
donor
China has one of
in
the
China?
lowest percentages of organ donors out of any major country. But despite this, it's somehow known as one of the easiest places to get an organ transplant, especially for wealthy individuals. People even travel there from other countries to get life-saving procedures, as transplants that could take years and years in the US can be done in
Wait, hold on. So, wait, China doesn't have an organ donor program, but it's the fastest way in the world to get an organ? Not a voluntary one.
in China in the matter of weeks, as long as the money is right. Which begs the question, where do these organs come from? Well, in recent years, China has been caught executing prisoners that were not sentenced to death simply in order to use their organs in this trade, all because of the staggering amount of money.
Fuck? Dude, China's fucked up. I thought NA was fucked up.
That can be made per procedure. And though this practice works
Well,
for
I didn't
adults,
know.
there is one thing that these prisons
This is
don't
old
have.
news?
Children. So when a child needs a new organ, let's say one of a high-ranking official or a wealthy member of Chinese society, where do they turn? This idea has prompted the belief that China has been doing some shady things to obtain these organs, like perhaps kidnapping and killing innocent children, simply to use their organs and save other wealthy children in order to gain a massive profit. Now I have to say that this is not a fully confirmed theory by any means, but it is a fairly common belief even among members of China's own population. And because of this, X's 4 videos prompted outrage across social media, with many calling out the government for their involvement. And as soon as those fingers started to point, the case took a drastic turn. On the morning of January 15th, the Beanbag Adventure channel would disappear from the Douyin site without explanation, which honestly comes as little surprise. X had shown his face all over these videos and was clearly not shy about exposing this lab, and with so many people now blaming the government, it was only a matter of time before he was silenced. In fact, X himself even foresaw this happening all the way back in that first clip. Unsurprisingly, when X's account went dark, many immediately began to fear the worst, believing that he was not only silenced on social media, but silenced altogether, likely being thrown into prison somewhere or just killed outright. Because of this, X was hailed as a hero for risking his life to show the world what was truly happening there, and most believed that this would be the last time we would ever hear from X again. But as it turns out, something much stranger would happen from here. Just a few days after its removal, the Beanbag Adventure account would re-emerge, this time with all 4 of these videos missing. And even more bizarrely, he just continued uploading videos from there, going to different locations and making that same content he once did before stumbling across that lab. Despite the massive virality of the story, not once has he ever acknowledged any of his previous findings. And if you look at his page today, you would never know that just a few months before, he had the entire nation in an uproar.
Holy
The whole situation
shit.
is incredibly off-putting, and who knows what happened to X during that time his account went down. But whatever it was, it clearly frightened him enough to never speak of this abandoned building again.
I feel like if they killed him, it would be too obvious, right? You know, like assuming all this is true. So they had to like get rid of the evidence, but do it in like kind of secret. Yeah, that's what I mean. They re-educated him. You know what I mean?
For many, this behavior confirmed
I mean,
the
that's if they
suspicion that
cared.
the government
You know
was
what I mean? That's
somehow
if they cared.
involved
But no,
in
you're
whatever
probably
the
right. They
activity
probably didn't
was
give a fuck.
happening within this structure.
Yeah,
While
yeah.
for others,
I
this
don't know. This
confirmed
is
that
outside
was
of my
all somehow
knowledge, man.
staged. As if it were real, the chances of X being alive right now would seem to be rather unlikely. Plus, within all his exposés of this lab, he never actually revealed where it was, causing doubt in the minds of a select few. But if I'm being honest, I just don't believe that those bodies could have possibly been faked. Though due to the nature of cases like this in China, a true answer has never and likely will never be fully revealed, leaving us with nothing more than speculation and a mystery far darker than any we've ever delved into.
Damn, that was pretty
I'll be
good.
monitoring this case for the next few months to see if anything changes or is revealed, as due to the high level of censorship,
was pretty good, man.
information was incredibly hard to find on this story.
You know, that was good. I mean, well, good in like the super fucked up way.